So a very warm welcome to our audience worldwide. My name is Rick Garretts, and I'm honored to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for today's SciNet Live event. The name of the event today and the webinar is called Mitigating Risks to Your SaaS Environment, Best Practices and Key Considerations. So we have an amazing panel, and I'm going to kick us off. Robert will be joining us in a few minutes. But while we're waiting for Robert to join, what I'd like to do is go around the room, starting with Nitin. If you could, everybody could do your intro first and just give the audience context of your background. Thank you.
Sounds good. So I'll kick us off. This is Nitin Raina. I'm the global CISO for ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a global technology consulting firm. Been with the company for 14 years, and I'm based out of Chicago. And nice to be here. Thanks.
And Robert, hello, welcome. You have the ball. We only did one intro, so look on if you are next, you could take us out, and then Jim.
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, Mukund here. I'm the head of product security at Giant Financial. Been here for about 3.5 years. Been in the fintech space all my career. Nice to meet you all.
All right, Jim.
Wait, Rick, I'll jump in afterwards.
Okay. All right. Good.
Good afternoon. Jim Rutt, CIO and CISO of the Dana Foundation, New York City. Great to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Jim. Terry.
Hey everyone, I'm Terry O'Daniel. I'm the head of security at Amplitude, a digital analytics company. Before that, I headed security at Instacart, and I helped Netflix build out their security assurance program. I love working with risk, and I can't wait for this discussion. It's great to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Great background. Nick, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Nick Riva. I'm the head of enterprise corporate security at Snapchat, or Snap. We make the Snapchat app, so if you have kids, apologies for any of the distractions. Been at the company for about 7 years. Before that, I led security at SpaceX, and I've been in this space overall for about 17 years.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Welcome. And then Yanni, you're next, please.
So hi everyone, my name is Yoni. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Valence Security. We're a SaaS security vendor. We help organizations find and fix SaaS risks. Obviously, I'm probably the most excited towards this conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. And Robert, welcome. Hello, and you have the mic.
Great. Well, sorry, I had some technical difficulties. I'm not even going to go into what happened there. Anyway, I want to thank you all, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the SciNet global community. And Rick, thanks for opening up. So Terry, are you still out in San Francisco, Bay Area?
That's right. The center of SaaS product world, I'd say.
Yeah. So let's start with you. What are some of the best practices that you've implemented to mitigate your risk in that world?
That's a great question, Robert. I think what's most important in our ecosystem is really understanding what are we protecting? What are the risks to the business? And I think often in the security engineering community, we can get very excited about somewhat esoteric corners of configurations and the threat of attackers. But one of the things we do to really align our practices with mitigating risks is, first of all, understand what the crown jewels of the company are and really ensure that we're talking about business risks in a way that makes sense. I could build a great application security program, but if it's not in alignment with Amplitude's mission of securing our customers' data, it doesn't necessarily serve the needs of the business. So I ensure that we're talking about business risks. And then I think about, because we are a cloud-first digital native company, everything we do is cloud first. So almost everything we do involves nth party risks. There's nothing we do that's on premise. There's nothing we have built ourselves and store in a data center. So we're very cognizant of all the risks of our vendors in our ecosystem and how they feed into our risk profile. And then we're very cognizant of building customer trust with our enterprise customers and how both of our internal practices and our ability to manage third-party and fourth-party risks with our vendors, how that really is the core of the customer trust we're trying to build to win and keep the business of those enterprise customers.
Nitin, same question to you.
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the points that Terry just made, and I think for us, what's also important, because we are a consulting firm, right? So I think our use cases for SaaS is mostly internal. We don't tend to use SaaS services for our clients, but internally as well, we are trying to we are starting to educate our leadership, right? And one of the points that I have, I really feel it's important that people have started moving to SaaS, and they feel that you're moving a risk to someone else, which is not true, right? You still carry the risk, right? You all have seen the recent developments with, and I would not name companies, that's not the intention here, but there have been a lot of breaches that have impacted various clients, various customers. So educate your leadership, saying the overall ownership of data backups, data recovery still lies with you. The incident response, of if your data is exposed, still lies with you. I think that's a change that I think we need to bring in educating our organizational leadership, so that they give us the relevant time and attention to handle these things. Because I completely agree with Terry that whatever we are talking about needs to be aligned with the strategic business objectives. So that's my 2 cents addition on this.
Thank you. Mukund, I want to, this space continues to grow, explode. And when things do that, increased risk comes with that. What are your thoughts on the most common vulnerabilities that you see in the SaaS environment today? And if you can make a prediction moving forward, what that would look like as well?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen so far, misconfiguration of how people configure their SaaS ecosystems is like the biggest kind of class of vulnerabilities out there in many ways. Many people go buy a product or a solution to go help them with a particular specific need, but don't really take the time to go figure out or understand or keep track of how things are changing with that vendor, and thereby opens up misconfigurations. I think even access to those systems or provisioning, deprovisioning is also another huge aspect with some of the SaaS aspects if that's not done. But I guess really back to, it's not just how you are reviewing or analyzing the risk for the vendor. It's also about how you're integrating with them, and also trying to see what that can introduce to your ecosystem. So I think it's a continuous evaluation kind of a scenario at that point.
Jim, what are your thoughts on the most common vulnerabilities that you're seeing with your team, and any prediction for the future that you need to be ready for?
Helps if I unmute. The biggest challenge has been and still is the lack of correlation between access controls across top level SaaS platforms, in terms of figuring out the proper levels of access, and then figuring out from a deprovisioning perspective, are you doing the right thing in that perspective? But from a vulnerability perspective, I focus primarily on data. I mean, the shared model responsibility of SaaS, that's the number one reason why we went all in on SaaS 13, 14 years ago, is to start to abstract a lot of our operations out of a physical environment. Here in New York, we've had a ton of business continuity type of events over the past 25 years. That was a driving force. So I'm constantly focused on any kind of situation where data is at risk, primarily. Understanding that a catastrophic failure of any of these SaaS platforms is beyond my control.
Mm-hmm. I want to stay with you for a moment and discuss the role of third-party vendors in SaaS security, and how organizations, from your perspective, can evaluate and manage these vendor relationships to mitigate risk.
There's another key top-level principles that I think would benefit most organizations in terms of being able to manage that. So from a vendor risk assessment perspective, I think you need to get very well, I would say, nuance in being able to understand the levels of risk from a third party, from an nth party down the line as well, transitive risk. And there are a number of TPRM platforms out there that can assist with that. But I think from a manual perspective, you have to have the understanding and really a bottom line level of trust with these organizations. I think no vendor questionnaire is going to be able to give you 100% trust unless you really understand and have a very tight relationship with a lot of these vendors. The other thing is to understand how to continue monitoring a lot of these platforms, being able to audit, make sure that compliance to the levels of the SLAs and all the other risk levels are where they should be. And then from the beginning, making sure that contractual agreements are well understood from an SLA perspective, from in the shared responsibility model, like I said before, clear understanding of where roles and responsibilities lie in both parties. And then from a vendor risk management program perspective, start to build towards that as you add on more and more SaaS platforms.
You know, when you said trust, were you really trusting the culture and the way you view their responsible actions, behavior, everything that is a positive attribute to their character, I think. Is that what you mean by that? Because you really don't know if you can trust the firmware, the hardware, the software.
Right. I think it's less of those abstracted components than it is the folks that are helping to run these platforms, that manage and hold your data. And it's just building those cultural relationships, I think, that are going to promulgate trust. Yeah.
Nick, you have to leave, I think, on the half hour. I want to go to you. Same question, your thoughts on that. Then I have another question for you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I really think there's three components to this. The first component is the classic vendor risk management, GRC. How do we evaluate vendors that we want to do business with for egregious risks that may be exposed through the vendor risk management process? I think the panelists have talked about that quite a bit. The second part to me is the technical integrations. How do we, as a cloud native company like Terry's, integrate more SaaS products into our ecosystem? They often require OAuth grants. They often require API integrations. They often require access to consequential data from places like Google Workspace, from Workday. How do we securely do that? How do we do it with a kind of paved path approach where it isn't a free-for-all, right? Where the teams that are requesting these products, they have some guardrails for us to follow, that we put in place for them to follow. And then the third part, and this is very, very important, I think a lot of folks don't really get this right, is for the most consequential SaaS products you have in your environment, you need to monitor at a log level interactions with the products from an API logging perspective. Very few companies I think get this right. It is quite a bit harder. But I think without that, you don't actually see what's going wrong. You can't see when there's exfiltration from a Salesforce unless you're ingesting Salesforce audit logs. You can't see if there's egregious misconfiguration from a Google Workspace unless you have those logs. Logs is the first starting point. Logs are going to a data lake and they sit there and they age. What's most important once you collect the logs is to generate signals. Then you can fire your signals to your incident responders, and your incident responders can activate and take action. And I've dealt with many of these things like this. So this is like kind of the playbook that we follow. And I think without that last part, you're really just kind of trusting the relationship. And relationships aren't only built on trust; they're also built on verification, as somebody very wise said.
Yeah, I want to stay with you. So when we talk about threat actor groups such as Lapsus, Octopus, Star Fraud, and other high-profile actors creating highly effective phishing domains, how can an organization use threat intel from providers to stay ahead? And then keep in mind, Gen AI is accelerating the sophistication and speed of these type of attacks, Nick.
Yeah, oh, that's spot on. Yeah, I mean, look, we face these folks as an industry 2022, and some of these threat actors, the folks behind Octopus, were indicted recently and captured in Mallorca on vacation, buying yachts and such. So, look, the only way I believe is through threat intelligence. You have to know what they're planning to do against you, and you have to have minimally that. You also have to have the logging layer that I talked about. You have to have the signaling layer as well. So if you scan the dark and gray web for mentions of your company domain, fake authentication domains being created, which is what Octopus was doing. They were basically building like this kit to highly simplify the creation of fake Octa pages. If you're not finding that and doing something about it, minimally informing your user if possible, from a like a CASB perspective, blocking that traffic, you're probably not going to win this game. People are probably going to fall victim. And I'm not going to call out companies, but I'm in the Bay Area here, and major Bay Area companies fell victim to Octopus. I really think the only way to hedge this is through threat intelligence and observability.
Mm-hmm. Yoni, same question to you, or any comments you may have of what you've heard so far, and the question on lapses, Octopus, etc.
Yeah, I think they're great comments, by the way, so far. And I think when you combine the two key themes, I think SaaS has become very complex to manage in terms of the amount of opportunities that SaaS provides us in terms of boosting productivity. There's a lot of toggles and changes you can make, whether if it's API configurations or data changes. You can make a lot of changes on the shared responsibility side of the customer. And also, the key points, I think, from Terry and Nitin earlier were around how do you collaborate with the business and how do you make it a joint effort, because SaaS is distributed managed across the organization, right? Sales manages Salesforce, Workday is managed in HR, GitHub is managed in dev. So when you combine these two elements, the complexity of SaaS applications and the fact that the SaaS applications are no longer or never were actually centrally managed by IT and security, you need to build practices that help you to be proactive against what could potentially go wrong within these applications. Because even if you look at the patterns that most threat actors use within SaaS applications, they weren't sophisticated 0 days, yet maybe they used a fake domain to get in first for the access, but then they leverage very basic misconfigurations, lack of MFA, a failed offboarding of an OAuth token that nobody really needed that should have been revoked. There's typically a combination of very basic steps in the SaaS kill chain that they use across the board that can be prevented with the proper hygiene of managing identities, integrations, data, configurations overall across the SaaS applications. But the base of it is ensuring that there's proper collaboration, because otherwise, eventually the business has the ability to override a lot of these decisions and just run fast to do their job. Not anything malicious, but just to do their job. And enabling that collaboration is key to eventually foster better hygiene for the secure SaaS applications, and from there to ensure that the organization is better prepared to whatever the threat actor is going to try to do, because eventually it's not going to be sophisticated, because SaaS, the other side of the shared responsibility model is that you also can't do too many things at your side of the shared responsibility model. And that attackers are going to look for those small, oops, this was an admin that didn't need admin access, or oops, here's a user without MFA, and very basic elements that proper hygiene can help reduce the chances. Again, nothing is bulletproof, but at least reduce the chances of when it happens that you won't be affected.
Yeah, fundamental hygiene is always key, and sometimes it just doesn't happen for some reasons. Nitin, over to you. What approaches have organizations taken to handle backup and recovery for their most critical SaaS applications, and what parts are directly in control of the customers, and what parts are handled by the SaaS vendor themselves?
Yeah, I think, just before I take that question, I just wanted to add one more thing to the conversation, which the previous point that Yoni made, I think, and some great observations, Nick, from you as well. I think what we are trying to do, and this is, just been like, 12, 18 months within our organization, is we're doing a lot of offensive security work, right? So we're doing a lot of red teaming on our SaaS apps, right? Working with our IT organization and our business organization. And exactly that, right? Like, it is still those basic attempts and attacks that we are falling onto, right? And then I think we need, as a SaaS security, tenant, we need to do our due diligence as well. So we are working to see if we can, the popular sales SaaS systems, or I wouldn't want to name products, right? Or the talent, tools that we use, right? So we try to do a lot of offensive red teaming work internally in close collaboration with the business and with the IT organization. So just wanted to highlight that. I think going back to the question you highlighted, so we traditionally, and this is an area where I would be very interested to learn more from the fellow panelists. I think we tend to rely very heavily on the organization itself. Like, so if it is Workday, for example, right? So we are assuming that we will rely on Workday's DR right? We will not be building a DR for our Workday tenant. We'll rely on Workday. So, but then we tend to, use the native functionalities that we can, do snapshots and version controls that we can do to actually make sure that our data is backed up, and then make sure this is done by the people who are actually the custodians of those systems. But, I feel that, we, with the recent incidents, right, like we are ensuring that the organizations that we are using, they have their data is backed up, it's backed up and encrypted at the race. We are trying to do all of that, but I still feel fairly nervous because we are in a heavy reliance on the SaaS vendors themselves, right? I think, in some past scenarios, we have also seen the situations where, we didn't have to recover things from the backup, but we were also at the mercy, because I think Nick's highlighted the point around logging. So if we don't know what was breached, we are in, again, like we don't have the access to the audit log. So we don't know. We are relying on the organization to tell us, like, did we get impacted? You have to tell us, because we don't know whether we were impacted, because we don't have that, that information. So I think we are still in early stages, Robert, with the backup and recovery, but we are just using the native capabilities within the SaaS ecosystem. We're not using third parties yet. And I would be curious to see if others in this call, the panelists, are doing something.
So the early stage of backup and recovery, to me, I think that should always happen. I think just life, we always have to have a backup plan. Maybe that comes from my background, but I want to go over to Nick before you leave, Nick. As most knowledge work happens through a browser, how does that play into a modern CASB strategy as part of your overall SaaS strategy?
Yeah, great question, Rob. I think knowledge work happens mostly through the browser, so we need to double down on making browser the new endpoint, where we focus a lot of our attention on interactions through the browser and apply DLP controls through the browser. So there's organizations out there that are adopting what's now being called SEB, Secure Enterprise Browsing. Google Chrome Enterprise Premium does this. There's a couple forks of that in the community. That's been really effective. We've actually talked about this at conferences. I have some papers I can share if folks are interested after the call, but constraining folks into a single enterprise browser and then applying layered controls for the SaaS products they're interacting with. I think one of the gaps with some of the other methods for observing SaaS application interaction is that it's on a per API basis, right? So they'll integrate with a common like top 40, top 50 applications. And I think that's a good starting point. But what if you have 300 SaaS applications? How do you observe through the interactions of 300 SaaS applications? How do you start to warn and block sensitive data transfers to applications that should not have sensitive data transferred into it? If you have a browser-based strategy, you can actually observe that within the body of the post, coming from the browser, and warn or block on it. And that's what we've done. And it's been highly effective in basically catching and stopping and preventing sensitive data transfers into applications that should not have sensitive data transferred into them. The other thing I think is going to happen is we've been talking a lot as an industry about this concept of DSPM, so data security posture management. Scan all your data and then tell me Nick, what's toxic. We haven't really extended that to SaaS applications yet, per se, like a little bit. I see some of this play in the industry, but I think that's kind of the next wave, because that's like a really hard thing to solve. It's unstructured data, versus like an RDS database where you kind of know what you're looking at. But it's very consequential because if you don't know what sensitive data exists and you don't have a way of governing the new addition of sensitive data, you're not going to win this battle.
So Nick, would you say that the browser is the new endpoint?
I did say that, and I stand by that, and that's my one-liner for this webinar.
I like it. Well, you got to cover all your bases, right?
Exactly. And in most modern companies, a lot of work happens to the browser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Terry, regarding incident response, what are some of the better strategies that you see are effective in recovery in a SaaS environment, and how can organizations prepare for and minimize the impact of security breaches?
Yeah, as we were discussing disaster recovery a moment ago, that was my first and horrible thought is I'm pretty used to the old world in which we did a lot of bare metal restoration tests, and that world was complicated and stressful, but it was within our control. And the new world is challenging. We've certainly, I have a playbook of incident response procedures that we run, and in fact, our security incident response procedure, our SERP in general, is growing and does start to expand to more use cases. But I'll admit that's something that terrifies us when it comes to our reliance on being cloud first. There's only a few vendors that are absolutely critical for our ability to run operations. And if AWS is down, we're down. That's it, period. There's just no economic way that it makes sense for us to have that level of dual homing across multiple regions or et cetera. So we have to go into those risks with eyes open, and we have to make sure that we are drilling relentlessly into the pieces that we have some control over, the connectivity. Like, how do we spin back up our connection if GitHub goes down, right? What is our ability to continue to ship code? Where do we pull that code from? How do we get it to production, et cetera? We do have to think about some of those critical pieces of inventory, infrastructure, I should say. But we are also realistic about there are some elements that we simply we're dead in the water if we can't use them. And we have challenging conversations sometimes with our customers, enterprise customers who ask us about their ability to continue to operate. And it's a tough conversation, but what we can do is we can fall back on, despite those, sort of bedrock foundational IDP or infra IaaS type services, there's a lot within our control, and anything that's within our control, I'm a huge believer in muscle memory. The more that we drill our incident response procedures, the more we find points of distance between what we thought was the case and reality. Sometimes it'll come out in company values. I think incidents are an amazing way to test company values. I don't want to test them live during the incident. I want to drill them so that we have the opportunity to find those things out beforehand. But either way, that is a way to find out. We might say we're incredibly transparent with all our customers, and that's a good value to have. But where the rubber meets the road during an incident is where you test those values. So I think the more we pressure test those values, the more we drill them, the more we find those surprises and have a chance to deal with them with eyes open in a calm and rational manner before the actual problem happens.
I love what you just said, Terry. And Nick, I want to get to you in a second before you leave, but two things: muscle memory. Absolutely. I tried to implement that in my golf game and I still suck. I don't even play anymore. That's how bad I am. You brought up all your eggs in one basket, essentially, with AWS. I'm going to go off script here. I'm going to go around the table here, and I'm going to just bring up when Nikesh went all in on platform. The stock dropped 30-something% overnight. And then I sent a text to 20 CISOs, 15 replies. Essentially, would you put all your eggs in one basket? I should have said, would you put all your eggs in 2 or 3 baskets? But I said one, and all of them said, cybersecurity 101, essentially, never put all your eggs in one basket. However, we've got a consolidation movement that always happens. AT&T, Mobile, platform play. You got Microsoft, CrowdStrike. What are your thoughts? Do you think the reality is that Nikesh made the right decision, that you're all going to get caught into a 1 or 2 platform play? I'll start with you, Nick, and then we'll go around the table.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Look, there's going to be leaders and there's going to be laggards in the vendor space. And when you choose leaders, you have a belief that the leaders will do a better job than the laggards. And sometimes that belief is challenged and proven to be untrue. Our friends at unnamed bird company, taught us that a single channel file can take down thousands of Windows systems. Nobody would have expected that. I would have expected a leader in this space to have dealt those kind of cards, but it happened. So how can we de-risk that? That one's really tough. No amount of vendor risk management could probably de-risk what happened. So, and I think in summary, to be just in closing, just be mindful of who you pick as from the pool of leaders and laggards, and have plans to de-risk where possible, and where not possible, have good incident response plans to respond, right? Because that's all we can do at that point, and that's what we did with the bird company incident. And yeah, we were back up in about 2.5 days. Not too bad.
Well, having what I said, do you think that'll impact the entrepreneurial community, the innovators, the early stage companies that we need so importantly?
I think it creates opportunity to show that you can do something better. You know, it's every don't ever waste a crisis, right? Like every crisis, there emerges a opportunity to do something better, whether that's, you know, a new bird company or a new better way of managing what the bird company does. There's probably an opportunity being created there to de-risk, and I think that's for the entrepreneurs in the room, the folks like Yanni, to identify and then take to market.
I agree. Well, thanks for joining, Nick. Yanni, over to you. Same question.
Thank you, guys.
I think it's more challenging when it comes to SaaS compared to the Palo Alto question, right? Because eventually in SaaS, you're not going to have two productivity suites or two HR systems separate. You're going to have to eventually choose the vendors that you're going to trust and make sure that you at least have mitigation plans to keep availability high, even if something happens, like the incidents that Nick was referring to, because they may happen, and these stuff also for AWS, it could happen as well. But eventually you don't have a choice but to choose the vendors that you trust and collaborate with them. Where when it comes to security, I think you have more flexibility on being able to not always be dependent just on one vendor, especially when a lot of vendors are not precisely in line or part of the critical path of users. It's easier to have either flexibility on who to choose to pick to focus on which areas. You could, in theory, have two CSPMs for different cloud environments, and then when needed, you could do a hot switch between them if any one of them falls or something happens to them. You don't have to go all into one vendor, right? There could be operational overhead for that, but I think it's a different aspect between, like, it's a different set of a basket. It's a different basket in terms of the eggs that you can put in it when it comes to SaaS versus your security infrastructure. But it is more similar to, you eventually need, for example, if you have a firewall, because that's how your architecture looks like, you eventually have one firewall and the data goes through it. Having two firewalls is not precisely what you would build in terms of your architecture. But more the monitoring solutions, SIM solutions, and others, I've seen a lot of organizations that take more of a flexible approach of having more flexibility on how they can easily move, at least when needed, between different vendors, because it could be a crisis of somebody collapsing because of a technical error, but eventually it can be other reasons that will eventually make a decision, force a company to decide to move on from a specific vendor, and having that flexibility is critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, no one's immune, right? It could happen to the big, the small, and the little. Let's go over to you, Jim. Your thoughts on my question.
Sure. So I have been, am, and will always be a best of breed person when it comes to any kind of security controls. I just feel that putting all your eggs in one basket from a platform perspective, there are benefits, but I've seen more benefits from just being able to pick out and align controls to risks and get the best in each bucket from that perspective. So in terms of other areas of SaaS, I mean, especially from a recovery perspective, we're kind of fortunate. We have a number of SaaS platforms here which are proprietary and can't be duplicated very easily, which is okay because we have very good understanding of a short-term contingency plan for business processes in those areas. My main worry would be if Microsoft 365 went down, because not only is it so easy to move all the legacy communications and email system and all that other kind of things, we have tremendous feature creep in that area because of the wide swath of adoption in terms of all the different modules in that area. Would be very, very difficult to retrack and try to duplicate in a separate platform all the functionalities and features there. It's something we still struggle with. And I think it's just because of the nature of how these platforms offer up new features constantly. It's just hard to be able to disable them or to restrict them, you know, in a practical manner, I would say. So although we want to be able to offer these things to our end users, it's more or less a big part of our, I would say, user awareness, because this is part of some of the user risk in using some of these areas, is that they're going into parts unknown. We can't protect them. We may not be able to recover them. So yeah, those are.
You mentioned Microsoft. It almost reminds me of the banks too big to fail.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one thing. I think if Microsoft, in some inconceivable scenario, were to, suffer catastrophic loss, I think we'd have bigger problems at that point than just trying to recover our email.
Serious critical infrastructure matters. Terry, your thoughts?
I'm an engineer by training, and 80% of my career, I didn't have the option to buy what I wanted. I had to build it. So I was fortunate to work in environments like Yahoo that had 20 years of infrastructure and access, and we could just sort of layer good controls on top of that. Like Jim, I have strong feelings about build versus buy, but I like to think I've mellowed with age a little bit, which is anything that is primarily operationally focused, and that means the bulk of the human hours are going to be spent dealing with rolling something out. In other words, it's an IT operation function first and foremost. I will err on the side of going with the platform, because as much as I want strong controls, usually those types of endeavors are just time sucks. And if I can minimize human hours, I will probably err on the side of the platform. But going back to the first thing I said, if I'm not buying best of breed to really target the business risks that I have as a company, then I'm failing my job. So as I called out before, we're a cloud first data analytics company. Should be no surprise that means a lot of data, a lot of customer data. And since we're cloud first, it's being stored in the cloud. If I don't invest in best of breed cloud posture management, detection and response, controls like that, I put the company at an existential risk, right? And so I have to lean into best of breed on those, and I will fight all day long for budget and for the specific tool I want. But in other areas, I have fallen back a little bit and said, let's lean into the platform. Let's make it easy for a larger pool of users to get the most value out of this tool. But no. You'll take this CSPM from me with my my cold dead hands, because this is the one I need to protect our networks and our cloud.
Great answer, Nitin.
I'm in the same boat. I know agree with Terry and Jim. I think the only challenge we are facing, which is I think a very real challenge, is we are under pressure, right? There is less money in the business based on what we are seeing with the market dynamics around us. So we are, as an organization like many others, we are carefully looking where we can consolidate. But again, not at the cost of compromising our enterprise security. Like we recently, made decisions to use a CSPM solution over another, because that was crucial for us. But in other cases, can we leverage our existing let's say a SOC solution to do some more bits, rather than taking a very special solution to handle the SOAR capabilities? Might not, right? Like we can expand in some areas, and other areas which are really crucial, I think we should. So it's case on case basis, in my opinion, because we are also under pressure to. The budgets are tighter, the resources are limited, and we still have to protect the company. So I'm just reiterating what everybody knows, but I think it's very important.
Mukund, please.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say the same thing. As it really depends on what is the SaaS provider providing you from a business perspective, and also like what's the budget scenario for that particular org or the company. I would say I think like there is no need for us to have 3 or 4 different ticketing systems. We could probably consolidate that to a one solution. But for instance, we are a fintech, and if we need to, for instance, do payments or any in that sense, it's just like crucial to our business, and it's the bread and butter to us. there is a layer of abstraction where we could fall back to a different vendor if one of them is down or something else. So I think it really depends on how you architect it and what you really want to go. What is it that your business really cares, and how do you go spend time to do that? I think there's also the operational cost of managing all of these different SaaS providers too. It's not just about the monetary value; it's also the operational costs and also the amount of time even like security puts or IT puts into like managing that and securing that. So I think a bunch of factors play into place.
Complicated question. So John Horsfield's the Senior Vice President, CISO at Sandy Spring Bank. John, thank you for your comment. And he has a question, so I'm going to read the comment first. Regarding CrowdStrike, the architecture design of security systems that run in Windows kernel mode should get additional scrutiny during vendor acquisition. We never thought to ask for the details, unfortunately. If we did, however, I'm not sure we could have predicted what happened. In the end, the event mimicked an attack that we must have a resiliency answer to. Question is, are there companies out there that have a policy where if there's X amount of incidents with their vendor, they make a decision to either replace that vendor or not? I open the floor.
I don't know. I think it's kind of like closing the barn door after the horse has already left. So we've never had such a policy. I mean, certainly it would invite greater scrutiny if there was one or two incidents with a specific vendor, but as a prescriptive measure, I don't know, as a practical manner, we might come to an executive understanding that we need to take a look at alternatives, but it's all in context. I mean, from what I understand, what I've seen based on the CrowdStrike incident, various polls have said that most organizations are not looking to replace it. So, that take from that what you will.
I heard the same thing, and sometimes I'm talking to 10 to 20 CISOs a week. That's what I've heard. Yoni, I want to go over to you. With the distributed administration of SaaS and applications like Workday, Managed in HR, Salesforce, and Sales, GitHub R&D, how can security leaders foster collaboration better between security teams and distributed SaaS admins? I think at the end of the day, it's really a change management cultural challenge.
I think it's a combination of a few things. I think to Terry and Eden's point earlier, it starts with having the conversation of really understanding what the business is trying to achieve and to understand what the path forward looks like, and to ensure that the security policies are aligned with what the SaaS admins or the business admins are eventually trying to achieve with their adoption of SaaS. But eventually, even if you do the proper conversations and setups and everything else, eventually changes could happen within these applications, because we've seen different types of examples of, oh, I just needed to enable a third-party contractor access to Salesforce, so we disabled SSO, we enabled the local contractor to access it, and we forgot to turn it back on. Or, yes, we integrated something for a POC and we forgot to offboard it. There's a lot of changes that happen. And eventually, it's a process of building the proper communications, maybe even onboarding them as part of the process to make decisions about the risk acceptance level within these applications. But it always requires the proper monitoring and communication with them as much as possible on an automated basis, because the security team is always going to be outnumbered by the business in terms of how fast the business is trying to run, and being able to automate the process of the collaboration between the business users and the admins and the security teams is critical to make sure there are human in the loop of the decision making about how do you remediate new risks as they evolve. But the human in the loop doesn't have to be from the security team, which I think is an important realization that we had over the past few years working with our customers, is that a lot of them tended to ensure that there's somebody involved in the process, but it doesn't have to be from their team. It could be either the Salesforce admin or the business user that clicked anybody with a link on their OneDrive file or Google Drive file or consented to the new OAuth integration. They typically know the business context, but they don't always understand the security risks. When you explain it to them, they tend to do the right thing, but you need to be able to scale the ability of the security teams to collaborate with the business units. And we've seen that very effective, again, manually or automatically across the board within organizations. It really helps to ensure there's constant risk reduction, even if new drift or risks pop up due to different business needs or constraints.
I agree. I think they do want to do the right thing. They do care more than they used to. Mukund, same question to you.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how. Sorry, I'm just trying to not reiterate what Yoni said. I think he captured most of it.
I'll just repeat it. So with distributed administration of SaaS and applications like Workday managed in HR or Salesforce in sales, GitHub R&D,
Yep.
how can leaders foster collaboration between security teams and SaaS admins?
Yeah, one thing that has worked really well for us is we kind of triage everything in the open, and we are sometimes a very Slack heavy kind of company, and we have all our alerts come in through Slack, and as and when they come in, we kind of tag the owner based on the audit log, and then have them come and chime in on what's going on from a context perspective. And eventually, with time, what we have seen is people self-join those channels and then tell us, hey, I'm going to do something risky because it's for this reason, and kind of like talk to us about the change management aspect of things. But that's a culture that's grown over time, I would say. The other things that we've really that has helped us is like automation using some kind of workflow engine like Tines or whatever you use to like let people know that we detected that whatever you just did is a risky operation. Did you mean to do that? And if they triage it through that workflow, there's a lot more context given to the SOC analyst for that reason. Again, I don't think it started off as easy and nice this way. I think it's something that has been grown over time in the last few years for us. The other thing I've realized is like you have the maximum leverage with the business owner or the vendor at procurement. So taking the time at that stage to say, all right, we're going through setting up SSO, we're trying to turn on the audit logs, we're trying to work on with you to say what's going on. And you will get all their time and attention because they want that to be done. So I think doing that from a discipline perspective right at procurement is the best way to do that. Wonderful.
Thank you for that. Nitin, when you talk about perception of your leadership around SaaS applications and the security, keeping in mind the shared responsibility model, how do they think about it and how are you influencing them to be believers?
I think this is, we've been on using SaaS for many years, right? Like, very early adopters, for, various tools. And I think our leadership understands that the benefit you get by using SaaS is the availability, right? You don't have to host it, you like Google would do better security than any of us, right? Because yes, they have invested. That's the hope, right? So I think they get that. What I feel we need to do better in educating our leadership is we still carry the ownership of the the services that we use. The data still belongs to us, right? So I think reiterating that multiple times is going to be very important. I also feel that the SaaS solutions that we use should be mapped to strategic business objectives, right? So I think going back to that base fundamental, I think it was Terry and Nick and others who talked about crown jewels, who talked about what processes are crucial for the business, what systems are critical to the business, highlighting that time and again and saying, oh, because you're trying to, let's say, expand your outbound sales. I'm just picking an example. For that, your back-end sales force is going to be crucial. So you get it, like you are adding more things, but the criticality of that tool is also increasing. So they would get that, right? So if you transform and explain to them in business terms, I think they would acknowledge, they would actually reciprocate. So that's what we've been doing internally, mapping all of the investment that has been done on SaaS, linking it back to the strategy, linking it back to the strategic business objectives has helped us a lot.
Terry, same question.
I think Nitin covered it pretty well, but I would add the actually to bring it back to reference something Yoni said a moment ago. I think the business, no one in the business wakes up and says, I want to make security's life miserable today. They're just trying to achieve an objective. And for the most part, it is, and I don't mean this to be a pejorative word, it's simply ignorance. They don't understand the context for the decisions they're making. And that's the best thing we can do. We don't control the business, but we can provide them context so they can make risk-aware decisions. So I think to sort of align what Nitin and Yoni said, we have to start with an understanding of talking to the business about what are you trying to achieve here? What is the business driver? What's the KPI? What's the thing that you expect to change that helps us understand collectively the criticality of this process and therefore the criticality of the tools that support it? I think if we have that level of conversation, if you had that sort of conversation around your ERP system or something like that was critical to the daily operations of the business, I bet you could get the right level of executive attention. And I think sometimes we err on the side of trying to keep things localized and contained, and we don't necessarily talk about the risk, right? We err on the side of talking with the control owners, the control operators, things like that, the business administrators. Great, but those people are performing a function for someone else in the company who probably actually owns that risk. Maybe we should have that conversation at the right level. Maybe the person who owns the risk doesn't understand the implications of going with this vendor, taking this approach for authentication with this tool, etc. And I think sometimes we err on the side of, and I do this myself, finding the lowest common denominator, talking with a friendly engineer, just working it out and moving forward. But we're missing an opportunity to hold up a mirror to the business and say, this is what you're trying to do. This is the risk we're absorbing by taking it. Here's how we've mitigated the risk, but there's still some residual risk. Are you okay with that? And I think if we have that eyes open conversation, we're both helping ourselves be seen as a business leader and talking the language of business. And at the end of the day, we're mitigating risk.
Well, we always want to be seen as business leaders that can understand the business objectives and being seen as an enabler and driver of the business enterprise wide. I think that it should always be a goal. Jim, you're a CIO. You've heard today what we're ending up here on the hour almost. If this was a session with CIOs, how would the conversation be different?
Well, I think the biggest thing around from a strictly CIO perspective, well, I think, to be honest with you, there's a little more maturity from that side in terms of understanding how to communicate. And to Terry's point, that was just an amazing point that he made. How to communicate with the business. I think it's much more than just understanding the language and the nuances and the culture. It's really, there's a great book out there, and I can't remember the title of it, but they talk about business intimacy. And I think this is something that CIOs have really gotten a lot more mature about in terms of the project management and all the years of development. A lot of these more seasoned CIOs understand that they really need much more than just an abstracted understanding of how the business runs or a good buddy approach, kind of relationship with their business stakeholder counterparts. I think they understand at the core, they to show their value is to understand from its core how fundamentally how does the cash come in the door and what's needed to keep that business running, and to be able to infuse the technology and all the other elements of that into a way that's going to keep it running.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Jim. I think that divide with CISOs being seen as blue collar security guys, cost centers, Dr. No, reporting to the CIO has really evolved over the years to not be so much like that. Maybe more or less technical, and like I said earlier, can articulate complexity and complex matters in a business sense to their board of directors. It's getting better, still not there yet. Yoni, I want to go over to you and talk about what you're seeing with your customers. I mean, looking ahead, what are some emerging trends or challenges you see in securing SaaS applications? What functionalities would an ideal SaaS security provider offer to make your team more effective in identifying and resolving SaaS security risks? So not only as an entrepreneur, but what you're seeing with your customers.
Yes, I think we covered a lot of different points today already in just in this call in terms of SaaS security concerns. There's how do I ensure I properly manage my side of the shared responsibility model? How do I properly monitor and detect potential threats within the environment based on either threat intelligence or activities and logs? There's how do I even discover what SaaS applications exist within my environment, right? There could be hundreds of thousands of them. We're speaking mostly about the core ones, but there could be a lot of them as well. And also, how do I remediate risks on an ongoing basis? And eventually, the expectations from customers, and rightfully so, is to make sure that this is all consolidated into a view that helps you to manage your SaaS environment or your SaaS ecosystem at the best way possible. And that's kind of the path forward with a central platform that really helps you also to enable that proper collaboration, because we see that our most successful customers in terms of risk reduction are the customers that onboard Salesforce admins as users, give them their posture score and tell them, hey, how can we make a KPI for this quarter to make it bump up to a certain score and then the next quarter to a higher score. And they just do it because they can actually understand their risks and take ownership of the remediation steps. So when you combine all these different areas of value that customers are looking for into a platform that helps to facilitate also those, the potential, let's call it shift left and the equivalent from AppSec into the SaaS ecosystem world, then you get a powerful path forward towards actually remediating and reducing these risks and properly responding to threats as they occur.
What other best practices, in addition to that, have you seen with your customers deploy?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot, especially when you start looking at SaaS today, which is kind of the next evolution after IaaS that most organization has focused on heavily over the past few years. You find a lot of elements that have been dormant for years, whether if it's integrations, shares, users. There's a lot of elements, just ways that you can easily cut off, which could help significantly reduce the potential risk, because these are also the elements that attackers are looking for. The one account that you thought that you offboarded but didn't offboard, and they look for these edge cases. So focusing on what could be easily turned off or removed, but has minimal impact on the business because there's no business usage for it, is the quick wins that we see today within customers. And then from there, starting to build a path of how do I best understand what are the highest priorities, and to ensure, again, that all the relevant functions are involved in the ongoing process, because from there, it's more smooth sailing towards a continuous process.
So some diligent house cleaning during the springtime, right? Just cleaning it up. Hey, John Horsfield has another comment I just want to share with you, and if anybody has a response, please do. Our internal audit team has said decentralized admin does not work, so we are assessing what it would take to centralize all SaaS user admin and integrate as much as feasible with our IGA system. Business is generally okay with it as they keep getting audit findings. We still don't have a good way to transfer the admin cost to InfoSec from the business side. Any comments?
If I can comment on that, I think the biggest cost here is not the admin cost, it's the knowledge gap between what security teams understand about each one of these platforms or IT teams. Salesforce is a world of its own. Becoming a Salesforce expert is not easy for security or IT experts. It will require a very, very large cost that's to make that a knowledge gap or bridge that knowledge gap. So it's going to be a big challenge. And then when you multiply that by, again, Salesforce, Workday, Snowflake, GitHub, there are so many apps, and you can't have, it's not feasible for IT and security to be experts in all of them at the same time.
Anybody else before we wrap up?
I think this is a Jim question mostly, but I would say,
was thinking the same thing.
unless we've built some tax system, you're always going to be at the risk of as your architecture expands, as the number of apps expands, as the number of SaaS apps increases. This is just a perennial problem, and it's only going to get worse. The best time to solve it is yesterday, but the second best time is to start right now and find some way to talk about chargebacks or a percentile based or some. You just have to have that conversation, and you won't win it the first 10 times you have it, but you have to start the conversation and just like set a new baseline. That's my IT guy who escaped to security perspective, but I'd love to hear Jim's perspective.
Yeah, it's somewhat exacerbated, Terry, as well, by the fact that you look at, I would say, who the leading IGA vendors are. They're not keeping up with what I would call the leaders or the next generation innovators in the other identity areas as well. So in terms of being able to get the data in the right area and have these IGA platforms truly be effective and return value in that is a little more difficult. Now, hopefully that'll change soon.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your shared knowledge and the amount of transparency we've all learned. And when we have that trust in the room like we've had today, knowledge is shared and gained. So thank you, and thanks to our attendees for joining in. Hope to see you October 16th live in person at SINET New York Summit. The day before, we have a 3-hour CISO-only risk executive workshop, and hope to see all of you there. Take care. Bye-bye.